It is music, Miss Honey said, and then, though as embarrassed at having revealed such a secret part of herself, she quickly pushed open the gate and walked up the path. Matilda hung back. She was a bit frightened of the place now. It seemed so unreal and remote and fantastic, that it's so totally away from Earth that it was like an illustration. Grim hands or artisan would it was a house where the door producer would live, with Hansel and Gretel, where Red Riding Hood's grandmother lived, and the house of the seven dwarfs and the three bears, and all the rest of them. It was straight out of a fairy tale. Come along, my dear, Miss Honey called back. Matilda followed her up the path. The front door was covered with flaky green paint, and there was no keyhole. Miss Honey simply lifted the latch and pushed open the door, and went in. Although she was not tall, a tall woman, she had to stoop low to get through the doorway. Matilda went after her and found herself in what seemed to be a dark, narrow tunnel. You could come through the kitchen and help me make tea, Miss Honey said. She led the way along the tunnel into the kitchen. They could tell, if you could call it a kitchen. It was not much bigger than a good-sized clothes cupboard, and there was one small window on the back, with a sink under the window. But there were no taps over the sink. Against another wall there was a shelf, presumably for preparing food, and there was a single cupboard above the shelf. On the shelf itself there stood a primus stove, a saucepan, and half a full bottle of milk. A primus little camping stove that you could fill with paraffin, and you light at the top, and then you pump in the pressure for the flame. Can you get me some water while I light the primus? Matilda said. The well is out in the back. Take the bucket here it is, and you find a rope in the well. Then you hook on the bucket to the end of the rope and lower it down. But don't fall in yourself, Matilda. Matilda, more amused than ever, took the bucket and carried it out into the back of the garden. The well had a little wooden roof over it and a simple winding device, and there was a rope dangling down into the dark bottomless hole. Matilda pulled back up the rope and hooked the handle in the bucket to the end of it. She slowly lowered it until the splash and the rope went slack, and she pulled it up again. Behold, there was water in the bucket. Is this enough? She asked, carrying it in. Just about, Matilda. I don't suppose you've ever done that before. Never, Matilda said. It's fun. How do you get enough water for your bath? I don't take a bath, Miss Honey said. I wash standing up and get a bucket full of water, heat it over this little stove. I strip and wash myself all over. Do you honestly do that? Matilda said. Of course I do, Miss Honey said. Every poor person in English used to wash like that, till not so very long ago. And did they have a primus? No, they had to heat the water over fire. Are you poor, Miss Honey? Yes, Miss Honey said. Very. It's a good little stove, isn't it? The primus was roaring away with powerful blue flame, and it already had the water in the saucepan, and it was beginning to bubble. Miss Honey got a teapot from the cupboard and put some tea leaves into it. She also found a small loaf of brown bread, and she cut it into 2 thin slices, and from a plastic container she took some margarine and spread it over the bread. Margarine, Matilda thought. She must be really poor. Miss Honey found the tray on it, and she put 2 mugs and the teapot and half the bottle of milk in a plate, with the 2 slices of bread. I'm afraid I don't have any sugar, she said. I never use it. That's all right, Matilda said. In her wisdom, she seemed to be aware of the delicacy of the situation. She was taking great care not to say anything to embarrass Miss Honey. Let's have it in the sitting room, Miss Honey said, packing up the tray. and leading the way out of the kitchen and down the dark little tunnel into the room at the front. Matilda followed her just inside the doorway. In the so-called sitting room, she stopped and stared around her in absolute amazement. The room was small, square, and bare as a prison cell. The pale daylight entered and came from a single tiny window in front of the wall. But there were no curtains. The only objects in the entire room were two upturned wooden boxes to serve as chairs, a third box between the floor and the table, and that was all. There was no pictures on the wall, no carpet on the floor, and only rough, unpolished wood planks. There were gaps between the planks. There were dust bits of old grime had gathered. The ceiling was so low, with a jump, Matilda could nearly touch it with her fingertips. The walls were white and plain, but the whiteness didn't look like paint. Matilda rubbed her palm against it, and it was her skin, and it was whitewash, cheap stuff used in cow sheds and stables and hen houses. Matilda was appalled. Was this really where her neat little, trimly dressed schoolteacher lived? This was all she could come back to after the day's work. It was unbelievable. And what was the reason for it? There was something very strange going on here, surely. Miss Honey put the tray down on the upturned boxes. "Sit down, my dear, sit down," she said, "and we'll have a nice hot cup of tea. Help yourself to bread, and both slices are for you. I never eat anything when I get home. I have a good old tuck in the day school lunch. It keeps me going until the next morning." Matilda perched herself carefully on an upturned box and more out pointlessness than anything else. She took the slice of bread and margarine and started to eat it. At home there would have been buttered toast and strawberry jam, and probably a piece of sponge cake to round it off. And yet this was somehow far more fun. There was a mystery here in this house, a great mystery, and there was no doubt about it that Matilda was longing to find out what it was. Miss Honey poured tea and added a little milk to both cups. She appeared to be not in the least ill at sitting on an upturned box in a bare room drinking tea out of a mug that she had balanced on her knee. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking very hard about what you did with the glass. It's a great power and you have been given, my child. You know that." "Yes, Miss Honey, I do," she said, chewing her bread and margarine. "So far as I know," Miss Honey went on, "nobody else in the history of the world has been able to compel an object to move without touching it or blowing it or using outside help at all." "The fascinating thing is," Miss Honey said, would be to find the real limit of this power of yours. Oh, I know you think you can move just about anything, but there's doubts in my mind about that. I'd love to try something really huge," Matilda said. "What about distance?" Miss Honey asked. "Would you always have to be close to the thing you were pushing?" "I simply don't know," Matilda said, "but it would be fun to find out."